Welcome everybody to the second in detail webinar celebrating the RIAS Special Category Award winners of 2025. The awards this year were judged by myself, Jazam Al-Jawad, Caroline Greer and Craig Hamilton, which resulted in 21 shortlisted buildings, 11 RIAS award winners and a further 7 special award winners. So this is the second in the series of the In Detail series. So please head to the RIS events page if you'd like to sign up to the other sessions. All the webinars will be recorded and are on the RIS YouTube shortly after this. So this week we are joined by Eilidh from Izat Arundell, who will be giving us an insight into Caochan the Creige, which was this year's winner of the Architectural Interior Award, with thanks going to Laurence McIntosh, who generously sponsored this award. So some notes just before we begin. This session will be recorded and will be shared afterwards. There's a Q&A button at the bottom of the screen, so if you could submit any of your queries through the chair and we'll ask Eilidh these questions at the end. So as I said, our speaker today is Eilidh. Eilidh is one half of Izat Arundell, an architecture practice grounded in craftsmanship, local materials, and slow, intuitive design. She studied her Part 1 at Glasgow School of Art and Part 2 at the University of Edinburgh before gaining international experience at practices including Kengo Kuma in Japan and Helen and Hard in Norway. In 2017, she co-founded Izat Arundell with her partner Jack, and their debut project, Porta Studio, received multiple awards and widespread acclaim. Eilidh also teaches and mentors, advocating for self-build and traditional trades with a thoughtful, imaginative approach to architecture as a built art firm. So I'll just hand you over to Eilidh.
Hi everyone. Thanks, Anne. That was really nice. Thanks. Good intro. Right, I'm going to share my screen and hopefully this will all go smoothly. Put this up. I'm going to change this to full screen. Does that work? Can everybody see that? Anne, is that okay for you?
Yeah, that looks good.
Nice, right, okay. I actually haven't timed this, so I know I'm meant to be keeping to a good time. So I just hope I hope we can do it okay. But I actually I can't see the time on my screen. So if anyone can just, Maxine, if there is like a 10-minute, like let's go at the end, just let me know. Okay, so I'm talking to you today about our project Caochan the Creige, which is our own home on the Isle of Harris. My husband and I built it ourselves with my brother Alistair, and this is the story really charting through from I'm kind of skipping the part of how we found the land, so if anybody wants to ask questions about that's fine, but I'm just going to go straight in with once we've bought the land and talk you through from there on. So for anyone who doesn't know, so I took out a slide which was a map of Scotland. I think we all know where we are, and the Western Isles is on off the west coast of Scotland. You can get to us by ferry from Skye or from Ullapool, and on Harris itself, we're on the east coast of Harris, so we look back over to Skye. This photo here is coming down into my village of Caochan. Normally you can see Skye on the horizon actually, but not in this photo, so I promise it is there. But yeah, we're just, our house is just on the right hand side, it's just out of shot of this view, but it's sort of it's known as the welcome into the bays of Harris. And this is the context of our house. This image isn't actually very often shown, which is curious, but it shows you, yeah, just more of the placement. A lot of the views show you the sea at the facing the other side. But it's nice to see how the house really sits within this landscape. And the east side of Harris is known for this rocky, it's called Knock-and-Locken. It's a good saying. It's the landscape type. Lots of rocks, lots of little lochans, and it's influenced the entire house. We like to listen to a landscape, and it was very obvious to us from the very beginning that we needed to use stone. So this was taken, we bought the site and we were investigating house. We'd been over a couple of times at this point, but we realized very quickly that all of the Western Isles is a place where it's a simple material palette, often just what people have lying around. A lot of the earlier buildings from, you know, the kind of 40s, 50s, 60s, they were using hand batch concrete, and we wanted to use hand batch concrete. This is, I'm going to show you design we actually prepared before we did the house that was built, and the whole thing was meant to be in situ concrete, hand batched. And the idea was that we would still be using the aggregate from the landscape, but translating that into a much more contemporary building. So here's design one, which we actually submitted for planning, and we even took it to building warrant. So it was quite a serious proposal for the site. And you can see that, I don't know if you can see my mouse on the screen, but if you can, this kind of rocky oval shape here, this is the big craggy feature, which the house that we have designed it was designed around. So in this original scheme, I wasn't really paying attention to this kind of prominent landscape feature of our site, and I was just trying to design something which it was a 2-bedroom house with a sort of entrance hall, low single story, so it was split over 2 stories, had bedrooms upstairs. And you can see from some of the images, I put these early renders in because I wanted to show this continuation of the interior language that we have carried through into the design that we've got now. So the idea was we were going to do pitch pine. It's now we've used Scottish cedar, but you know, this sort of timber clad interior, which is reminiscent of a lot of the vernacular houses, black houses around on Harris in the Western Isles today. So yeah, we had to mourn this design because this was quote 1 that we got back. So we designed this. We bought the site, I'm going to say, in May, and we got quotes back in October, I think, for the designs. We went through quite a fast design period, and this quote was just for the groundworks, and the prelims were about, yeah, half, a little bit, a third of the quote. It was just so much money. So obviously we've got a good idea for how much things cost, but we were not expecting prelims to be this high on a project, and we just knew at this point, after we received this quote, that it wasn't even something we can negotiate. We had to change the design. We had to go back to drawing board, and that's where over Christmas. So we got that quote at the end. I think it was honestly the 31st of December, 31st of October. Or November. Over Christmas, I redesigned the house. I sort of had to put my mourning of the design. It wasn't. I'm so glad that we did change the design, but you know, when you can imagine something, it's difficult to leave it behind. So I've parked it for another project. But you can see here, I put this sketching. You can see that kind of connection piece in the middle from the earlier design, and then we've got these 2 kind of box shapes, if you like. That I was trying to like bring the house in smaller, make it. It was just a development of the earlier design, but I just couldn't shake it off. So that's why I just had to change the tack, and that's why I built a model. I was like, I've got the time over Christmas. You know, think of what you're taught at university. I know this seems really silly for like a seasoned architect to say, but just literally go back to the drawing board, change your approach, change how you think about something. A lot of what we do is about craft. It's about using your hands. It's about how you work with the materials. So it seems so obvious that I should have built a model much earlier in the process. But through that process, that's where I realized we have this beautiful big craggy feature, rocky craggy feature on the site, where we didn't want to change it. We didn't want to blast it out. We knew we were going to work around it. And that is honestly just, it's so simple, but that's how we came up with this angle that we've used throughout the whole design. And I'm just, yeah, I can't tell you how right it felt when we landed on the concept. It feels so right that you feel that you should have known it from the very beginning, but that's the process of design. So you can see from that, this is again early kind of plans that we were looking at. So I was translating that cardboard model into plan form, and you can see the angle there. We were still for a long time, even now we talk about changes that we might make to the bedroom, and this is now a utility room, not guest bedroom. The bathroom layout is slightly different. But the kind of core concept of the house is very obvious here. Something which we changed actively on site was that we removed this sunken living room. We wanted this room is quite big, and we wanted to again have that feeling of creating these smaller pockets, which feels much more like the vernacular buildings here. Everything's very small. You build modestly, you live in modest spaces. So we were trying to recreate these smaller pockets of space even within the house at this early stage. But it turns out there was a really big rock there, so it's all flat now. This is so again progression of these sort of test renders that we were doing. A lot of that same materiality is coming through in the house that we've designed. So it's for you guys for the talk today. I thought it would be nice to show that kind of linear or non-linear, it depends how you think about design, process through. So at this point because we were sort of chasing our heels a little bit. We felt we were behind on schedule. We knew that we had wanted to start building in as soon as we could in I think it was 2022. I think so. I can't even remember now. Time's funny around COVID. So we flew through the building warrant, and one of the key things, well, two funny things I'm going to show you here. So we worked with David Narrows. We've worked with them for a long time on different projects. But the strip foundation here, so underneath the wall, we've got strip foundation, and the wording was that the strip foundation had to bear onto suitable strata, so rock or trench film. And this was one of the funniest early moments in our building experience, where we had phoned up Breedon's to ask for something like 30 cubic meters of concrete, and the guy was like, "Why? What are you needing that for?" We're like, "Oh, we need to backfill the trenches," and he's like, "Don't do that." He's like, "Just use hardcore and compact it. Like, it will be 1,000,000 times cheaper." So that was absolutely fine. But it's some of these things that we're the experience of building ourselves and asking the question, because we don't have lots of money, we had to really go back and question everything, or other people would be guiding us. And we've got so much knowledge now through that process that it's massively helped our technical stages of the project, our construction detailing, and also being able to interact with contractors on the site. So every student that's coming to ask for some work experience at the moment, I'm trying to advise them, although it's good to get practice in office, go and build something, because you learn a lot while you're doing it. But I will hold my hand up to another funny thing that we did. So this detail here, we had to adapt it section AAA. So you'll see that we've got a 100mm block at the bottom with a 140mm block on the top. And that is not what David Narrows asked us to do, because it's the most ridiculous thing. But at the time, there wasn't enough. Jewsons, who were one of our suppliers, they didn't have enough of the 140mm blocks, so we ordered 100 blocks, but without really thinking of how we were going to translate that into a 140mm stud at the top. So David Narrows were kindly adapting this detail for us as we were on site when we exposed ourselves to the situation we created. Right, okay, and you're going to try and fly through some of these build shots. I'll try and talk them through, because if you haven't built on site or been involved through lots of stages, it's tricky to know. It'd be nice if there's some students here. Hopefully this will be useful for you. So day one, almost, how do you set a house? So we had a surveyor come and plot out the kind of external points of the timber frame, and these were what these metal rods are for in the ground. So he would spray on the points, and we would then set it out. Because we've got quite an unusual shaped building, I think we could have probably done it ourselves if we were just using string lines with a rectangular building or a rational shape. But because we had such unusual angles, the surveyor points were really critical. I would say they're critical, and setting out is really important for every project. But if you were building a house for yourself on a site, it doesn't really matter if you're a little bit out, as long as you know yourself what you want to achieve. But for us, the setting out was important. So from there, we were able to spray on the extents of the strip foundations, which we were going to dig out. This is what digging out the strip foundations looks like. You quickly realize that all of that hard work that you spent on a surveyor setting out your house and spraying on the lines just quickly disappears. So you have to, you kind of have to hope and pray that you're roughly digging in the right place. Jack's obviously working hard here on the dumper, and that's Jack's dad, who came out for a couple of weeks to help us. He had some building experience, so that was very nice to have him in those early stages. yeah, again, you're hoping and praying that the house is roughly in the right place. For us, for this type of house, again, it doesn't really matter if you're a little bit out. We knew which were the important things. We hadn't ordered anything in advance. We hadn't ordered the frame. So, you know, even if the foundations were slightly off or slightly off at an angle, for us, it didn't really matter. We did pour the foundations extra wide just to be sure. But this was one of the things where we hadn't anticipated the trench fill that I was talking about. So underneath the strip foundations, when we were digging out the site, you can see there. So at the right hand side, you know, the bedrock is right there. David and I were actually asking us to break out this rock, but in the end they agreed to us doing a shallower foundation because the rock is actually harder than the concrete. And in other parts, you know, you're dropping down easily to 2 meters below in a very, very short span. So we were trying to calculate how much trench fill, how much backfill we needed. And so Jack, my partner, where is that gone? Don't know where that's gone. Anyway, I'll take it to this one. He was giving me depths, and I was able to translate that into 3D and try to figure out where, like, how much trench fill we were needing, what the foundations were looking like. So this is what the foundations actually look like. You can see there, anywhere that's blue, that's where bedrock was coming up above our site, above the foundation level, and then anywhere just needed the backfill. But what this meant, this bit here was a problem for us, and also this area at the top corner. So rather than breaking out is, you need big machinery to break out Louisiana nice or dynamite, and we weren't interested in either. So we actually just ended up lifting the house, the level of the house up, and planning agreed to that quite easily because of the conditions. So I can't say how nice every stage of a build project is. Every single stage you feel so proud of everything that you've done. And particularly getting out of the ground, out of the mud. We were doing this, we started in January, at the very end of January, and we did the foundations through to March. So this was the kind of very early, early periods of the year. It's not a nice time to be outside in the Hebrides, but we got it done. So this is the strip foundations going in. You can see some areas here where we were pouring extra wide. A couple of reasons. One, because I was saying we weren't sure where the actual lines were, but also there were some areas where we had like 2 foundations very close to one another. So rather than doing 2 individual strips, we just pour an extra wide area. Yeah, so this is us getting ready. That's blinding layer down, pop-ups for the drainage are through, 100mm blocks are down. That was good. And this is heading into just before we were going to pour the slab. Another learning curve here. We ordered all of these special rebar like supports, and they are just useless. I mean, they just break as soon as you stand on them. There's no point in them. They slot nicely in between the rebar, but again, you just don't need it. So in the end, you put blocks down or rocks, and you can walk over it while you're pouring. But we were so neat and green at this stage. You have to kind of learn as you do. Also laying a DPM in any type of weather is very, very, very difficult. It's basically a giant sail. So there's only 3 of us, and we're all trying to lie on it. As the winds were picking up to like 40, 50 miles an hour, it was like comical, I would say. So these are all things where now, again, if we're on site and we're talking to contractors, you know, we're much more attuned to the weather, like how realistic something is, like why a contractor might say that we're delaying something because of this. Like even something before, I would just said, just put the DPM down, you know, it's fine, it's not that windy. But actually in real life, it's so much more practical to delay by a couple of days and take the time to do it right. So this is our slab going in. For us, living on Harris isn't as remote as many people think. Stornoway is an hour away. It's the 3rd biggest town in the Highlands. We've got multiple builders merchants. We've got deliveries from Amazon very quick. We've got 2 ferries. We've got flight. We've got freight sailing. We've got Bredens who deliver concrete. It's in a place which is remote in terms of a map. It's not remote in terms of living and building. There's many more remote places in the UK, even on the mainland. So I feel we were quite lucky in that sense. We were actually thinking about living on North Uist for a while, and I'm glad that for our first handmade project ourselves, I'm glad that we were in an area that was a bit easier to build. One thing though, I would like to see Harris and Lewis invest in is a concrete pump. This So the concrete comes and it comes out this chute. But most sites, if you're practical around here, you take enough land where you can drive the concrete mixer around the site and drop it off. But the concrete mixer could only come up to this one particular location on our site. It couldn't drive around. So that meant raking it by hand, which it's like, I don't know if anyone's raked concrete, but it's pretty heavy stuff. It's like raking clay. And again, because we had chosen these like bad, or not bad, but pretty useless rebar supports, they were just breaking under our feet. So it was tricky. But we did it. You can see even here, so this was the day after. This is not the concrete was still partially drying out, but these were just pockets of rain, of areas that we hadn't poured very flat. So that was something we had to deal with later on in the build. And that was the end of stage one. So we used this stage as a bit of a tester for working together. So my brother had never worked with my husband Jack before, and we just, family comes first, and we wanted an opportunity for everyone to decide, like, do you want to do this? Were we even going to take it on beyond this stage where we're going to try and subcontract the work? But luckily, we all decided that we wanted to continue with it. So I can't say how happy I am. And this was us back on site in June. So we reconvened. So we finished in March and we reconvened in June. So we had a couple of months just to like get our head, like thinking of the rest of the build, buying 2 caravans, taking them up to Harris, and setting up for the summer. I can't tell you how nice it was coming back to like a warm, warm site after building in the depth of winter in the Hebrides. I think Alistair's caravan was the nicer caravan out of the two. He'll probably contest that, but we each had £400 to buy a caravan with. So it was a bit of a competition to see who could find the best one. Right. Okay. So the next stage was building the frame. One thing I would love to hear more from architects who've built with kit frames. Obviously, kit framing is something we get asked loads about from clients, like, oh, can we get a kit frame house, or even like prefab elements of the frame. And I honestly, from building it myself, I don't know why people do that. I could see maybe on a much bigger building, like a community center or something, but like the framing is one of the fastest parts of the build. It flies up in a couple of weeks. I don't know, the gain that you get from it is from what we would have got from this project. I don't think we would have got that much extra. So it was such a fun stage because it was so fast and it was so light and so different to the groundworks that we were doing before. But it also meant that we could really position the windows. This was us bracing even in June, and you get some high winds, and particularly when we were getting the sheathing boards on the outside, they're just like big sails in the wind. So we were lining up the blocks. They're basically like our early holding down straps, and then putting all these braces in for the winds. But by doing it ourselves, we were able to really take care of where we were positioning these smaller windows. The bigger windows were roughly set because you can see here on the left, these are just sort of bigger openings. We did tailor them slightly, but it was more these smaller windows that we were able to really capture the kind of the nicest view, or the nicest part within about a meter squared, which I think is one of those extra things. If you're building it yourself on site, you're taking the time rather than doing a kit frame. Well, it's easier to do on site. So framing going up, this is some of our breather membrane on, the black membrane, and this is the steel work. We had a couple of steel beams going in to help span over the unusual roof, the shape of the house. So these were kind of big moments where we were quite excited seeing building things happening for us on the house. And we worked with Narrows to really minimize the amount of steelwork needed. One, steelwork is very, very heavy. It's a very expensive material. It's difficult to move in high winds. So we worked with them to use timber lintels wherever possible. So this was one of the timber lintels going over the big window openings. And so this is, oh, here we go. Dan, our stonemason, he arrives on site because at this point we've got the frame up, breather membrane in, and Dan, we had to limit Dan's, Dan couldn't, well, he obviously couldn't come up before we had got to this stage of the project, but he'd also just had a wee baby. So we had to be careful with the time, just to make sure he was not away from home for any longer than he needed to be. But he was such a great addition to the site, and I feel like he's now like a sort of brother in the family, if you like. And this is what, so Dan, we got all the stone from the house is from, we call it Kenny's quarry. Kenny runs the quarry. So on the right-hand side, you'll see a map, and we're down in this place, Caochan. And if you just travel up the road, anyone who knows Harris, this junction here is where you sort of turn off the fast road down into the bays. And Kenny's quarry is just 2 minutes along the road. So in total, it's, yeah, 4 miles away by road, less if you fly. And this is what the quarry looks like in real life. It's they'll do a blast every couple of years, and yeah, there's stone that you can get, but it's not building stone. You have to sift through it. I mean, even if you think you've got a good stone, it might be 6 times the size that you need it, and we don't have any breaking capacity for that. So selecting the stone, we were actually incredibly lucky. We got stone from Carrie's quarry, and also there's a quarry just in North Harris as well. It's run by Breedon. So we used the 2 quarries, and both had done blasts relatively recently, and that had meant that there was a much bigger selection of stone for us to use. But I think now, if we had started building now, they haven't done blasts since, and there is no stone available. So that was a complete stroke of luck, because we hadn't anticipated that at all. And in the end, we were getting Kenny to drop off stone with 20-ton deliveries, which looked a bit like this. It was 10 times the size of this in the end. So we were just asking Kenny to drop off roughly the right size of stone. We were selecting the stone there, but we were only using 10% of it. So in the end, we changed our plan, and Dan, we actually spent more for Dan's time on the project in the quarry selecting stone rather than building. But you know, I think it was like £14 a ton, the stone. So I had thought this, when Kenny had said that, I was like, do you mean like £140? And he was like, no, £14 a ton. And I was like, God, I'm going to bring this in under budget. This is going to be unbelievable. But it's not £14 a ton when you only use 10% of it. So another learning curve. Yeah, so Dan and, well, mostly Dan. Dan was doing all of the stone selection, he was finishing all of the stones by hand. He quickly got a bigger hammer and chisel than he was using for the sandstone in Edinburgh. I think one of his previous boss had looked at his Instagrams on the early stages, and he was like, you're going to need a bigger set of tools for this stone. But yeah, it was incredible to watch. And even now, he, like, understanding how stones are, it seems silly to say how stone walls are built, but there's different like techniques, different ways that you can stack the stones. They're almost like, it's almost like a dialect of a language. It's incredible. So each area, even on Lewis and Harris, have different sort of voices of stonework. Dan is from Great Burner on Lewis, so he brought a lot of his family's knowledge of stone building down into the work that we had done. Even colouring is an art form for sure. This is Dan and Alistair moving probably one of the sills. It looks very flat on the top into position, and it's heavy work. You know, it's incredible. It was quite easy up to like waist height, but then we were up on scaffolding and lifting everything up by hand. So it was taking things slowly to be safe, but it was just a huge amount of energy to do. I'm going to talk about this kind of wall construction here as well. So I'm flying through because I'm conscious of time. So tell me if anybody wants to keep notes of anything you want to know more about. So on the left-hand side, I've tried to kind of pair the detail with a photograph that describes a lot of what's going on. So what you can see in the photograph there, so we've got the breather membrane here, which is over the plywood sheathing. Then we've got a cavity. We were going to have a clear cavity. You can almost sort of dry bed the rocks because the stone is so heavy here, but even that, we needed a little bit more bedding. So that was because they were so heavy, they were just squeezing all of the mortar out into the back. And within, you know, the first couple of meters, Dan was like, this is just, it's not going to work. We're not going to have a cavity. So even with clearing out and being careful. So he said, I'd never heard of it. He had said that he'd seen SureCav being used on another project of his down in the borders. So I had a quick Google, and yeah, a sort of lifesaver. It cost us an extra few thousands of pounds, which we hadn't anticipated for, but we wouldn't have been able to do it without it. We had thought about introducing often you can build the stonework against a breeze block wall, and that allows you to create the cavity. But we didn't have any experience of building a breeze block wall, and building a breeze block wall at that height, we were just like, there's no way that we're going to be able to do that with zero knowledge at this stage, particularly after our experiences of the ground floor, like doing the groundworks and coming up with the blocks, even like one or two like blocks up. We just thought there's no way we're going to build this wall straight. So the SureCap was a lifesaver, and you can get it. I think I'll use it on different projects. It's a very like plastic heavy product, but if you're in a certain climate or you're looking for that type of detail, then I would definitely recommend using it. So it just keeps a clear cavity, yeah, and allows you to build against it. So that's a SureCap going in, and then we've got the stone walling there, and up at the top we've got the early framework for the back of our concrete parapet, which basically just sits on top of the wall head. It sort of completes the wall head, and it allowed us to span over our bigger openings without a sort of fake stone lintel thing, an Ancon system or something. So for me, it's the one sort of little voice that I had continued through from this earlier design, which was all going to be in situ concrete as well. And I'm kind of glad that it just sort of, for me, it like finishes off the stone wall, which is very vernacular, but it just gives a little bit of a kind of contemporary lift to the project, which I liked. Yeah. Other things, so while we're on this detail, actually, all the architects, I can hear you all sighing. I went for a cold roof, so we're insulating in between the JGI rafters. I did that because this is probably the only like egotistical driven decision I've made on the project, where I really wanted to control the proportion of the concrete parapet, so the height of the concrete parapet in relation to the height of the stone walls, but then also the bottom of the concrete parapet had to align with the ceiling height inside, because it's obviously where the openings are as well. So all of those kind of different elements of the project came into point there. And I probably wouldn't do it for a client, just because if you're building with a main contractor, you're not on site all the time being able to check the ventilation's working. That's where the cold roof just it fails often because the correct ventilation is not in place. But we use crinkly tin as the base work of the former for the concrete parapet, and the crinkly tin created these little holes on the underside, which allowed venting to come in, air to come in, and that airflow comes up through a sort of framed plywood void, if you like, at the back of the concrete parapet, and then into the roof deck space. But at every stage of the roof, we staggered when we were going to be adding the insulation in. As we were building the concrete parapet, we really considered the sequencing of that, so we could check that the ventilation was working. And if it wasn't, then I will just change it to a warm roof and have much more of like a pronounced green grassy roof coming out of the top. But yeah, we'll see how it goes. It's my house. I can take a risk. So this is some of the concrete parapet. I'm very happy to share this detail with everybody. One, I think it's a good learning curve, but I'm pretty sure that there's not many people who will copy it. So because it's so ridiculous. But here's how it looks as you're building it. So we've got the top of the wall heads here. We've got, so on top of the plywood, the kind of plywood voids that we use, we've got a DPM coming down. You can see just there, that's the wrinkly tin just underneath the membrane. And this is we didn't have to use rebar all the way around, but we just continued rebar. We thought it's not that expensive, and it just helps minimize cracking and things like that. We increased it to what we needed over the lintels, but yeah, it was nice just to continue all the way around. Making the formwork for the concrete was also very, very difficult. You know, we didn't have that much capability to drill into the stone to hold it in place. So we like create there's a couple, I'll show you in a second. There's an image which do as I say, not as I do. Anyway, I'll come to that in a second. So we were hand batching the concrete because there's no pump on Harris. So if we had brought down the concrete from Breedon's on the lorry, even with a retarder, we wouldn't have been able to bucket it up in time onto the roof. We were pouring in sections, so even then we didn't need like a whole lorry, so we would have spent a lot more money doing it. So the only option for us was to hand batch it and lift it up in buckets. This was the point where everybody was very, very strong on the project. this is us lifting it up. This is our neighbour Paddy, bless Paddy. He's been to jail a couple of times, but he was really strong. So he was such a great help with the project. My brother obviously manning the concrete mixer. So this was the image I was talking about. So this was us trying to figure out how do you support a concrete lintel at height without like much equipment. So I think we'd borrowed like every acro prop as we could find on Harris, and we were just so worried. We were so worried about the weight of these. We were so worried about even a bit of like breakage at the bottom, because if any part of this plywood had like bowed out, then the line of the concrete would not look very good against like a very straight wall below. So yeah, we sort of belts and braces, but even then we were so worried about it failing. This was also after we so poured the formwork, poured the concrete in the formwork, struck the formwork, and what we had to play, before we put the formwork in place, or before we'd poured the concrete, we'd put a retarder, which is sort of like, for us, it was like a blue goo. It was, I could find the name of it if anyone's interested, but it just stops the first, I'm going to say the first centimetre of the concrete from really setting. And so it allows you to spray it once you struck the formwork. You can do it on a horizontal surface as well, but it allows you to expose the aggregate within it. And you can choose, so we were doing it with a power washer, and you can just choose how much exposure you want by how much you spray it. So it was a bit of trial and error for us as well. And while all of this was happening, we were working with a company in Edinburgh called GCB Joinery, who we use. They're based in Lasswade. We've used them from our very first project, RIAS Studio, and they know how to make windows and doors, and they're always very open to all of the crazy ideas that I have for windows and doors. So we decided to work with them. They were making our doors and windows, and we shipped them up. The doors and windows are made from Iroko. One of the reasons, so Iroko is a very like stable hardwood. It's obviously not native to Scotland, but there is precedent. I was reading in one of the, the like little white vernacular handbooks for Scotland. It's good, the vernacular working building group. There was a section on black houses I'd read a few years back, which has said that each black house might have one window, and the window itself was often made out of like driftwood hardwood, and that's just come across the sea. And it's obviously because it was just this very stable material to use for windows. So there was a little bit of a language coming through there from this vernacular building working group book that I'd read. And I'm very glad that we have used the timber. Of course, in this, where you have such high wind-driven rain or any exposed climate, using sort of timber windows is a bit of a risk. There is one area in our kitchen which we chose to have the door inward opening rather than outward opening. That was our own choice. We knew it would probably leak sometimes when there was a certain direction of wind, but on the whole, that's the only area that we get any leaking, and that was partly because of my design choice of having an inward opening door. But the rest of them are absolutely solid. So, in the grand scheme of things, a lot of our friends on the island have built houses or have renovated houses, and they're using all the big brands that we all use and know, Nordan, Rationale, and I haven't heard one single person not say that they've not had any problems with their windows and doors. Like everybody has problems with windows and doors in climates like this. So yeah, maybe it's more reason to use timber windows, I would say. So we managed to get window and watertight before Christmas. There was one period where, because obviously if you're moving big bits of glass when it's high winds, you can't do it. And so we ended up building to get, this was the last window that went in the living room, and the glaziers weren't going to come down, which meant we weren't going to achieve our goal of being window and watertight before Christmas. So we ended up actually building this sort of makeshift tent around this section of the house so that they could move the glass in and get it all in time for us. That was, again, you'd make these decisions of, right, we're going to be working like 4 hours late this evening and in the darkness, but we had all these lights set up, but you make these decisions to try and keep on schedule. And I think contractors do these type of things probably all the time without us knowing about it. And it's to be much more understanding of critical paths and programs, because best laid plans, we had scheduled in so much time for this, but even then there was so much that we hadn't anticipated. Or even if we had anticipated, there was so much stoppage time for weather. So be kind to the contractors when you have to review your extensions of time. So this was December. Do you know December? If anyone wants to come up to Harris, December is often a very good time. It's often quite a stable time of weather. We get amazing sunsets. You get the stars at night. But I think this was taken on like the 17th of December or something. We had friends up for Christmas and Hogmanay. So yeah, please do come up in winter as well. It's also nice to visit at that time of year. After Christmas, we were inside the house. We were window watertight. This was the stage that we started insulating. I can see also all the faces being, oh my gosh, you're using rock wool. Rock wool is a nasty, nasty product. The reality is that we had looked at, on every project we prefer to use like Scotch materials, local materials, breathable materials, anything that is even just nice to touch, that is going to be a winner. But I costed up all the options and we couldn't afford it. So we had to go for something a bit more standard, something that was already brought onto the islands that we weren't having to ship up. And that was just the reality of it. So I would rather say it like it is than try and say another thing. So yeah, again, reality of lots of taping, lots of seaming. I hope if Colin from Bailey is on this call, I'm very sorry, Colin, don't defriend me. We do like to use breathable materials where we can, but cost was important for us on this one. So we used rock wool. We went for a soft insulation. It's obviously not as efficient, but we wanted to use it because we wanted a very quiet house. The weather, lots of times of the year, the wind is so strong, and it's the wind plus the rain plus the hail. It just whistles. It's so loud, and we wanted a house that was just enjoyable to be in acoustically. So that's why we went for packing out the frame and the JGIs with rock wool, with a softer material. But we beefed up the U value by having a PIR on the inside face of things. So once we've done that, that meant we could get on with our floor. So you can see the underfloor heating pipes here snaking around. And we just laid that out ourselves. I did a sort of plan. I think, is it worth having plans made? I do think I've seen more efficient plans than I've been able to come up with from a supplier of underfloor. So yeah, 6 half a dozen maybe. But the underfloor heating works nicely. On top of that, we've got screed concrete floor. Again, that was just a standard product from Breedon's. Again, I'm happy to give the spec if anybody wants it, but up here they use local aggregate because we've got a couple of quarries that blast the aggregate and break it down. So all of the aggregate within the floor is Louisian nice as well. So it's like the 3 expressions of the stone. We've got the stone on the outside, the stone aggregate that's been washed back in the concrete parapet, and then the stone in the floor inside. Something else that we decided to do was put a sort of light mesh rebar in the concrete floor. You don't have to do this, but and we personally, we've been in houses where they've done a polished concrete floor and there's cracking, and we actually don't mind the cracking. I know for some clients it's an absolute no. So we didn't really do it to avoid cracking, but we don't have any cracks in the floor. So if anybody does want to really control it, like adding mesh in is not that expensive, and just include it in the specification, I think. Yeah, I don't know why we did it. There'll be a reason. Maybe we were just worried about it. So this is another thing of an unusually shaped house. So if you want a nice flat concrete floor, if you're going to polish it, you want it flat. You want it as flat as you can get at the beginning, because you're basically moving this machine over the floor. And if you have high points, then you're basically just grinding down these high points before you can even get to the lower points. So nice flat floor, but to create a nice flat floor, you really want 2 rails that you can kind of have a very straight edge, and pull that across the floor to create this leveling point. But because we don't have any parallel walls in the house, we were leveling by hand, and this is as level as we could get it. The reason that Jack has been hung, like his dad is like holding Jack there, is because we had this strict, once it had been laid, we said that we weren't going to walk on it, because we had heard stories of contractors who've done that. They've walked over to level a point, and you get these footprints in the aggregate because the aggregate's been squashed down. So we had this strict, if it has been poured, you're not walking on it, and that's why Jack is precariously trying to level this in there. This was so introduction of Joel. So Joel, Mary Anna Foster had recommended we get in touch with Joel. Joel is based on Sky, and he was running Sky Stone Studio at the time. I think he's still running it, but he also does some other things. And he came out to teach us how to polish the floor and lent us the kit to do it. And it took us 5 weeks of polishing, nothing else. We didn't do anything else for 5 weeks. Every single day, we just went back and forward, and that was purely because our floor was so uneven. If anybody knows Joel, you can imagine some of the words that he was using when he first saw the unevenness of our floor. Yeah, although the extract was sort of working, it wasn't working that well. And we had every single window and door open, but it still looked like this. So this isn't like an overexposure or like a wrong development of the photo. This is just what it actually looked like. And so we were wearing extreme protection all day, every day. And even that itself, it's just so uncomfortable when you're in that environment. You can't really see where you're going. You're breathing. It's just, yeah, it's very hard going. But we were getting there. So you can see here, this is when you're working your way around with the machine, you get these sort of satisfying patterns. So that was one thing that kind of kept us going through this 5 weeks podcast and creating these like nice patterns on the floor. But we were finally getting there, and we prioritized. So we were doing this, it must have been around February time. So it was very cold. We had all the windows and doors open. So we polished this one area down to the level that we wanted, so we can install the stove earlier and try and get some heat in the space. But this is what it looked like, and I'm so I can't say how pleased I am with the outcome. There's areas where it's still not completely level. When you see the light being cast over it, it's still a bit wobbly. But again, for us, that every bit of the house feels a bit like that. Every bit of the house isn't perfect, but every bit of the house, I think, is better for it. So I'm glad. I try and work with clients who like the same feeling, because sometimes when you're creating a very perfect house, you lose out on some of that, I don't know, the humanity of it maybe. So cue the timber. Flooring was down, insulation's down. This meant we could really begin to crack on with the interiors. We were, we from those earlier renders you'll have seen, we really wanted to have a very kind of timber heavy inside. We like tongue and groove lining. I think that's the vernacular of the islands of black houses and white houses. We wanted to use pitch pine. We want to use pitch pine or reclaimed pitch pine, because it's a very stable product. If it's reclaimed, it's been through its drying process, it's not going to move. But the price of the pitch pine had at least doubled from the beginning of the project when we were doing our initial budgets to the point when we were ordering. So we changed tack, and at this point we went for Scottish cedar. So we worked with Logie Timber, who are an amazing up-and-coming sawmill near Inverness. And so the cedars, yeah, they wouldn't tell me the exact location, but it is from outside of Inverness. And yeah, they were great in the process. So I would recommend contacting them for anything that you need. I would say there was a miscommunication in the ordering process, where we had ordered kiln dried cedar. So we chose cedar. We like the colouring of it. We like the tone of it. It's a relatively cheap Scottish timber. I think it's often overlooked, but it's also a very stable timber, even when it's wet. So we knew that if there was any problems with it, coming into the house, we were still allowing it to dry out, but we knew it'd stay quite straight, which is what we wanted. And that was partly my brother, who's a cabinet maker, furniture maker. He was helping us with these decision processes, which was very useful. So yeah, the miscommunication was that we'd ordered kiln dried timber. I don't know if it was my fault for not checking paperwork enough or asking for that to be there. It's in emails, but kiln dried timber is not 50% moisture content. Kiln dried timber is 19 to 13%. So when the timber arrived, we knew immediately when we started lifting the planks, we were like, these are heavy. So again, Alistair, my brother, was there with his moisture content, moisture meter, and yeah, I'm going to say the boards were ranging from between 21–22% through to over 50%. And that just meant, it meant our we had a choice to send the timber back and ask them to kiln dry it. But even that process, it was going to be, someone was going to have to pay a lot of money in return haulage freight fees, which I just, yeah, wasn't needed. I'm not sure. I think if you were on the mainland, I would have done that. Our approach was, we knew our program was going to be pushed back or condensed, but we basically decided to grade the timber into percentage piles. So we had 20%, 30%, 40%, and over 50s. And we stacked them in the house, and we turned the house into a kiln, which was, yeah, it was just the decision that we made. I'm kind of glad we did it. It was nice. The timber was here. Logie had cut it. It was everything that we needed. Because the reason for grading it was that we could like position the wettest parts and the warmest part of the house to try and bring those up quicker. But it also meant that the 20%, they were, we knew that we're going to use those for like the finer elements of the cabinetry inside, and then the kind of medium lot we were putting on the ceiling as cladding or on outside. But yeah, it meant when we were, oh, another thing, actually, this was my fault. So I decided to not, I asked Logie Timber not to plane the timber. I just said, just send it to us, which is like, this is what it looks like on the left. This is what like unplaned timber looks like. And that was such a mistake. And I did it to save money. And I really regret being a penny pincher. So I bought the boys a planer. This is the planer here. It's not like a commercial planer. It's just like an at-home planer. It's a good planer, but we had to plane every single board. I'm going to say 4 times, which when you see like the amount of timber, this is even part of it. It was every single room was stacked up. That is so much timber to plane. And it's also, yeah, you'll see in a second, but you can see there the difference of that's the plain timber that's going on the ceiling. So another thing that, you know, these stacks of timber just made moving around the house extremely difficult to do. And we were trying to, yeah, trying to put the ceiling up at the same time as, yeah, clambering over all of these piles. So yeah, this is what planing timber looks like. You get loads and loads and loads of sawdust. Every single person with like a sort of rabbit or guinea pig came to us, but even that was a lot, so we were burning it all. While we were getting like more of the inside finishes, where plaster was going up, timber was going up, we were able to see a lot of the feeling of the space with the landscape. So that at this time we were pulling together all of our samples and making some decisions for the interior elements of it. So again, it was making decisions. It's a very something I would say if anybody is working on the west coast of Scotland, if you're like based in Edinburgh or on the mainland or in a city and you're working in a rural landscape, make your decisions for your internal palettes on site. The light where we are in the Hebrides is extremely blue light. And I think, like, let's say if you were in particularly Glasgow, if you're surrounded by lots of red stone, or if you're in like another city, it's a completely different level of like colouring of light. So make your decisions in situ if you can. Oh God, this is so, okay. I decided not to take out like all of the funny stuff. We've got lots and lots of funny things from the build, but at this point, because we had like we were so pressurized for time. We were getting to the end of the build. We were in the internal finishes, which internal finishes we thought were going to be really fun. And I think they'd be fun if you had time to do it. But it's, let's say when you're doing the framing or the stone, you know, you're working on one thing for months and months and months, and you can kind of like relax your brain. So you're like, okay, you're getting up every morning, you know what you're doing. But when you're doing the internal finishes, every single day is something new, or every hour is something new, and you're having to like YouTube things and learn it and do it at the same time. So we were so stressed, and this is where we started, like, this was like the descent of our working conditions. So my brother just ended up living in his Volvo instead of his caravan, and we were at the pub every day. All of our neighbours were buying us drinks and just feeling sorry for us. And I also went through my mental breakdown. We were eating out of Tupperware. I was wearing pajamas all day, and I bought a cat just to try and like make things a bit better for me. So this is Midger cat, who is now comes absolutely everywhere with us. If anyone's got me like personally on Instagram, it's more just like cat spam in the Hebrides rather than like architecture. So you can come and follow me if you want any of that. And we decided this stage because we were kind of using programs, but we had photographers booked in. We couldn't change them, so we had a hard deadline. The house had to be finished because otherwise we would miss our our photographers, and we'd miss our marketing campaigns, and then we'd miss like the kind of follow on for being able to apply for awards and things like that. So it was so critical. And this was, we were trying to figure out who was doing what and like when, but when you're, yeah, it was way too much to do in no time at all. So yeah, again, be patient with your contractors when they're asking for extensions of time. But we tried to have some fun. So this was learning to tile in a day. We bought, for the, again, as much as we can, we like to use natural materials. These were from, they're called Norfolk Piments, with an M, P-A-M-M-E-N-T-S. And so they're just handmade tiles made in Norfolk by this family. And they're very, very lovely. And they have a pinky tone to them. And I wanted to, the Louisian Nice, in its like rock form, it has these like big seams of pink going through it. So I just wanted to carry some of that like pink softness into the house itself, and create a bit of warmth. We also used beech. So alongside the Scottish cedar, we used beech. We got the beech from Patterson's in Glasgow, one of my favorite timber suppliers, timber merchants. You can go around and select the timber boards. They're very happy for you to do that. So I was sent down to select the beech. Beech, I think, has kind of been done to death in the 2000s. Lots of people don't like that for, it's not used as often for kitchens anymore, but it's great. You know, you can, it's a great worktop surface, antibacterial properties, but it is a really lovely timber. So please don't overlook it. It's a good price as well. We wanted to like elevate that by, so we bought like long boards and like across the top. So we've got like a bottom right. Anyone who's a cabinet maker is also going to be looking and thinking that's not how you build a door. But again, when you're an architect, you can make executive decisions. So we continued like the top rail all the way over, and then these were like one continuous board. So when you see it in, again, they're kind of subconscious things, but when you see the kitchen as a run, like the top board is like one big board going all the way along. So you get the same like colors and seams going through, which is very nice. And then we chose the quarter sawn sections for like the mid section of the door. And then we laid them all out. So we also had to have the bottom and top runners all as one thing, but then we wanted even like the quarter sawn boards in the middle to like read nicely between one door and the next, because even we had very, very light patches and then darker patches, and some bits with some modular arrays and some without. So even that process, we were laying it all out and deciding and moving it all around. And I think a lot of these decisions are why the interiors of the project is such a success, because we were taking so much time over that like individual alignments of colors and spacing. We even did it with every single board on the roof. We laid out 10 boards at a time and then moved them and changed the order of them so that the knots and the colouring felt really nicely between one another. Good luck asking contractors to do that. These were so working conditions. We set up a worktop table in the middle of the living room, and we were building everything on site with very simple tools. I think my brother, who has experience of very, very good workshops, was yeah, he was very patient with us with the workshop we had created for him. We had worked with, so because we've got a kind of angled kitchen, there's, you know, the units, we could have probably got the standard units. We could have bought those carcasses from a cheaper place, but we worked with a company called Sorrel. They're based in Edinburgh, and he does amazing kitchens, but there's a couple of really good cabinet makers in Edinburgh that we've worked with. But James from Sorrel at the time had a bit of space in his program and is able to CNC the units that we wanted. And so that meant particularly I like sort of a very, very minor signature detail of my kitchens is that I like having the cutlery drawer above the oven. And so we were able to, you know, create the cabinets that we wanted, but even that there was coordination between the depth of the boards, the beech boards that we got from Patterson's. And so that like headboard, I wanted that to be continuous all the way around the top of the kitchen, and even that depth, the same depth as the cutlery drawer, and that then works with the oven. So there were so many things that go into making the decisions of a very, very simple kitchen. We also made all the doors. These were also beech. We used a kind of thicker set, a deeper board for our doors. They're traditionally made. Again, this was the workshop conditions on the left-hand side, so as best we could. But the doors are so lovely when you see them. I think my brother did a really good job making them. this was the night before. This was the evening before we had photographers arriving. Like, it should not have been this mad. I think the look on my brother's face like says it all. We were even the chaos on the top. I'm so embarrassed to even show this. This is like days of food. Like, this is not how you should live. But we were so up to the wire. We didn't even have time to clean anything. We were like, we have to get things finished. But we did it, and we cleaned it up, and everything was the photographers who arrived they could not believe the last like 48 hours that we had been through. But this was the first meal that we had in the kitchen after this process. And these are some of the photos that they took during that time. And yeah, there's so much, those bits in it. I won't be able to go through it all, but like the tiles there with the pinks that come through. The wood burning stove is a Yodel stove, so it's really far in the room because it doesn't have any heat plates on it, so you have to have a good distance. I was really nervous about that when you're looking at it on plan, but when you're in the space, it actually feels very, very nice. On the left-hand side, we have the Scottish cedar that's making up the shelves. That was the stuff I was saying earlier when we were grading the timber, and the timber that we had at 20%, that was the type of furniture, like that was the type of cabinetry that we were using, because it's like individual boards that couldn't warp. So that was, yeah, one of the reasons that we were grading it. I do have a television there now. I feel that's a dirty thing to say, but I do have a television there now. We also, I'll show you, I think there's another couple of photos, but I had bought little beach handles for the kitchen, but they just broke within like 3 days of use. I think it was more they were so cheap. I think they were actually like 50p from Juicing. Like, they're not something you should buy, but I thought they would be nice, like how bad they can be. But it was actually the ironmongery that came with them was just snapping. So we probably could have upgraded the metal parts, but I ended up getting metal ones instead. Yeah, there you go. You can see we've changed them out. The worktop is Caithness, so that's just, yeah, we got it from, we went and picked it up from Inverness. And do you know, I'm really glad we went for it, because it picks up, there's like a lot of like kind of dark flecks on the floor, and I think the kitchen's a very, very bright space. It's south facing, and the walls are quite bright with the timber. So I'm glad that we've got the depth of the worktop. It's very kind of black inky worktop that almost creates like a center of gravity for the room. But in real life, every single fleck of dust, of like, you know, like morning rolls, all the semolinas on top, everything just shows up on it. So it's an unforgiving worktop for making it for like day-to-day cleanliness. It's like bomb-proof. You can bake on it, you can do anything you want. We don't find any marks or rings happen, and even if we get sort of light where we need a lot of water around the sink, but we just oil it with olive oil, and the depth comes back up quite easily. Yeah, I haven't even talked about the outside area. You can ask me a question for it. But so when we had all these photographs that you've just seen, this was the state of the bathroom. This is what the bathroom looked like on the left. And that's why we don't have really many photographs of the bathroom, because every time a photographer came, it wasn't finished. We had to sacrifice everything, doing anything in the bathroom to finish the rest of the house. So the bathroom was the last thing that we finished, and it has a lot of the same materials that we're using elsewhere. This is spalted beech doors. I probably would have kept the regular beech over it, but we ran out of timber, so it was spalted beech on that side. But I think it looks nice. And that's it. Oh my God. Okay, I think we've got, oh, one last thing. We ran out of money towards the end of the project. So if you do see aerial shots or kind of up like shots in the landscape, you won't be able to see, you probably see that we've just got like the bitumen membrane roof on it, but we were so low of money at the end, we didn't have anything left. And so since then we've sort of been saving up and like doing these last little bits of the project that we wanted. So in March, we were able to finally install the green roof, and yeah, I'm so glad. It feels like it's the last part of the project. It's all coming together. So I'd like to show a nice photograph of that because I'm proud. And there's a list of our makers and suppliers. I'm really happy to send this to anyone. If anyone wants to know like anything we've used, just ask. I'm really happy to share, yeah, share any details. And that's it. Okay. I have no idea I'm doing on time.
Thank you, Eilidh. That was really fascinating, beautiful, and honest portrayal of the process and project. It was really fascinating. I think there is one question about whether you can explain how the cavity in the external wall is ventilated. I know that you went through that. Do you want to just touch on it very quickly? And then I think that's probably the only kind of question that we have time for.
Yeah, we've had a few different sets of judges here, and that is the one question that everybody asks. So it's a good question. So through the top of the wall head, we've got a lot that kind of all the way around the top is ventilated through the crinkly tin. And I probably should have. We were going to drill some holes into the bottom of the stonework. We even thought about when Dan was building up the stones, we were going to cast in like little kind of stainless steel tubes. But at the moment, we've been monitoring it, just seeing if there's been like seepage coming out of like any parts of the lower wall or like any parts where the DPC cavities are in. But there's not that much. So we don't think much is getting through, and anything that is getting through, sort of just like latent moisture, is just getting sucked up through the top of where the crinkly tin is. So we still might do it. I'm tempted just because I'm an architect, but Jack, we're having discussions about it. So good question.
So I think we'll just leave it there. Thank you again, Eilidh. That was just brilliant. Yeah, so this concludes the second of the detail sessions. Thank you for everyone for coming along, and look out for the recording, which will be up on the RIAS YouTube. And next week, we have Julie Barkley along to speak about the Fairburn Tower, which was the winner of the Equiton Project Architect Award. So
that'd be great.
Yeah. Thanks again, Eilidh, and thanks everybody else.
Thank you, everyone.